You've probably heard this word or this phrase quite a few times, cognitive dissonance, something that's said in the news, you see it in articles and other podcasts. Today, we actually want to talk about it really in its simplest terms, and we're actually going to talk about this more, is that your values or your beliefs don't line up with your actions. And we want to talk about how that affects us in our marriages and our relationships. Welcome to another episode of Amplified Marriage. I'm Brian.
I'm Natalie.
As you have heard us say many times, wherever you are, grab a coffee, grab a tea, chill out and relax. We're going to be talking about, it's a pretty heavy topic. It's not an easy topic, but it's something that is absolutely needed to be talked about today.
That's right. And if you missed our last episode, we talked about how fear fuels tension. Oh, geez, that's a tongue twister.
That's a tongue twister.
Fear of the unknown. We talked about anxiety and stress specifically for the what if scenarios and going through that. So if you missed it, highly recommend you check that out. We're kind of in a tension series, I guess you could call it.
Yeah. So. Just it's been one of those ones that as we kind of we did some research, we kind of thought back into our own relationship and how fear was such a part of it. Mm-hmm. How even some of what we're going to be talking about today in the cognitive. Say that 5 times fast. Tongue twister. Cognitive dissonance. How that played a real huge part of our relationship until we learned a few things like how to communicate, how to talk about expectations, how to actually deal with conflict, how those things actually left unchecked can grow into something big. And That's so right. We do have a definition, and we want to start with this about what it actually is. This is a clinical definition. This is a clinical definition. I'm going to let you read it because it's got lots of big words.
All right. Psychological conflict resulting from simultaneously held incongruous beliefs and attitudes. And the example that Psychology Today said was as a fondness for smoking and a belief that it is harmful. I know. There's a lot of mumbo jumbo there. We're going to break it down to simpler terms.
Okay, so here's what it is when we break it down to a little bit easier to like my kind of reading level is this cognitive dissonance is a mental conflict that occurs when your beliefs don't line up with your actions. Mm-hmm. And the way that has been put is that it's an uncomfortable state of mind when someone, myself or you or whoever listening, mm-hmm. has a contradictory values, attitudes, or perspectives about the same thing.
That's right.
And so when we talk today, there's going to be a few things that maybe you've heard, even in conversation with other people. And there's a bunch of terms. I'm going to read just a few of them, like mental conflict is one of them.
And this all means the same thing.
It all means, or aspects of the same thing, but like mental conflict, inner turmoil, psychological tension, belief discrepancy.
Moral dilemma.
You've heard that one a lot.
Heard that one the most.
Yeah, moral dilemma. Woo, who lets me speak?
That kind of podcast.
Yep. And like a value conflict. And so like when two people who are man and woman come into a relationship and two people that have opposing ideas, opposing childhoods, opposing circumstances, opposing the way they've grown up, opposing genealogies, different cultures sometimes. Different upbringing. Like all of those things come from a divorced home versus a not divorced home. All of those things can create tension in a relationship, which is a fancy word, and some things that can come up are things like cognitive dissonance. Now, we want to break them down, and we actually want to equate them to some of the situations we found ourselves in our own marriage and for your amusement.
And if you think, I'm going to skip this one, this isn't really relative to me. Like
Relevant?
Relevant. Oh, Lord.
Yep, here that kind of podcast.
Okay, we're just going to go with it. Relevant. You probably are in this current situation.
Yeah.
Because even as we were prepping and stuff, we're going through, we're like, yeah, been there, still there.
Yeah. We live here. Yeah. This one's been a tough one. We don't like this one. And so the very first one that we want to start with is like, we call it a value discrepancy. There's a difference. So the way that we kind of laid this out is when
financial.
This is a financial version. So say that I'm the spender and Natalie is the saver.
Which is true.
Is it though? Or at least it was. So because she's a saver and I'm a spender, our two versions of what to do with our money clash, and that causes us to have a little bit of tension in the relationship.
That's right. And it's hard, especially when you've not had ample resources as finances go for this to be a cycle that repeats itself.
Right.
Because when there's plenty, it's much easier to be on the same page.
Yeah, when your bank account is full, man, it's easy to trust God.
Okay, like we're going to save, we're going to put money over here, we're going to put money over there when there's substantial money to do that. Yeah. When there's not, and this is where we found ourselves, is when there wasn't, it was like we just kind of shut off like what we should be doing with our money. We're like, forget it. We're just going to go out for lunch or whatever. I'm like, we shouldn't go out for lunch because we really can't afford it. And you're like, I'm not going to let, not having any money prevent me from doing the things I want to do. And so we were in this constant.
Which is stupid. Which, even if I think back about it, it's really dumb.
Well, it was dumb. And we paid, like you've heard us say in many podcasts, if you have joined us in our webinars, we paid the stupid tax for our junky financial choices that we made. We paid a consequence for it. Well,
and one of the primary reasons for divorce in North America, I still think the stat holds, is that it's finances.
I would agree.
And it's a lack of communication. So Nat and I fought tremendous amounts over like, I'm not kidding. I wouldn't tell her. And this is, again, okay, this is where we're going to age ourselves. We're so old that if we wanted to know what was in our bank, we either had to go to the bank machine and then all of a sudden telephone banking come on. You could call in and it would tell you. This is long before. So I would know what was in there, but Nat would say I would leave the house in the morning to go to work. And she's like, you can't buy anything today. I was like, what do you mean I can't buy anything? He said, we don't have enough money because she called and we knew what was in there. She knew what the bills were coming out. She's like, you can't buy. We have to save our money. We want to have a little bit of extra at the end of the month to be able to do this, that, and the other thing. You can't spend anything. And me being like, oh, whatever. It is what it is. I'll just make more. Dumb me. Right. I would go out and I'd buy $10 lunch back when McDonald's was $10 or $7 or whatever it was. And that cost us. Or back when I was a smoker, she'd say, you can't go out, you can't have pop, you can't have any food, you can't do anything. And I would just go and buy cigars instead of saving the money. And this caused us. Or I would go to the store and be like, I need a new shirt. So I just buy a new shirt, knowing that I have plenty of shirts at home that are still usable. But for whatever reason, that did not sink in. And so that caused a tremendous amount of tension. And so our two values
were different. And there was this air of pride, and there was this air of, you don't tell me what to do.
Absolutely. And I'm stubborn that way. Like, why? I wish there was cameras to see what your face does in certain things.
It very much agreed.
But I'm stubborn, and I don't like to be told what to do. Like as an 8, as a challenger, I'm like, I don't want to be controlled. Right. I also don't need to be in control, which is almost counterintuitive.
And see, here's the thing too. We talked about finances before we got married.
And we talked about it all through. We talked about
all the way through. Like we talked about everything. But then you're faced with the reality of it. And it was like, we shouldn't, but like one, and then one gives in because one doesn't, I didn't want you to be mad. I didn't want, to feel like I was like lording over you, or telling you what you could and couldn't do and controlling you and all of this. And so there was this tension in our marriage for years. Yeah. Not just the beginning, years. Yeah. In regards to, we couldn't go on vacations because there was just no extra money to go on vacations.
Well, one, because I wasn't working at a really high paying job, and we honestly, we would have done a lot better had I not spent as much as I did. Right. There would have been more opportunity. But it's one of those things. We come from my parents didn't teach me anything about money. So what are we doing with our kids? We're teaching them about money. Like we used to pay their taxes for Amazon. Different world now. Yeah. You can pay up till 13 years old. You pay for whatever's on there. We'll take care of the taxes kind of thing. Like we're teaching our kids how to do money a bit better than we do. But we never learned that stuff.
Nope.
And I had to learn that the hard way. After going into debt, paying the stupid tax for years, like it was only in like 2018 or 17, 18, where we finally got our crap together and we actually paid our debts off. And now we're in a safe mostly a safe place.
I say so.
In a comfortable place that we're able to take care of our kids well and live in a really expensive city, and we're being blessed. But man, it's a lot of work, and budgets are hard. And the problem being is a lot of people...
consistency.
Well, consistency is hard with the budget, but a lot of people didn't learn how to budget. And then, yes, you talked about money. Like when we do pre-marriage counseling, we hammer on this with them because we always know one's going to be a spender and one is going to be a saver. Always. I've never ever we've never coached a couple or done pre-marriage with a couple that ever was one, they were both spenders or they're both savers. Mm-hmm. There's always one or the other.
Yeah. So just provided a lot of inner and outer conflict. And because, even if we weren't fighting about it like verbally, I was thinking it.
And there's tension.
Right. And it was just like, you concede it in the moment. It's like, oh, this is great. Like we're out and everything is fine, except everything is not fine because the reality of the situation is still waiting for you when you get home.
Yeah.
And we did not understand how to make our money work for us, but also to get on the same page when it came to budgeting.
Yeah. And then even moving on to one of the other ways that in marriage that you struggle in this area is that there can be different parenting styles. Is that one wants to be a bit more strict. Yeah. My hand is up, and I'm a bit more on the strict side. And Natalie, when the kids were young, was a bit more on the lenient side, but still strict. This is one of those areas where the majority of with our children, we've been on the same page for a lot of stuff. Yes. For most things. When it came to the kids, but we sure couldn't get finances together, but we sure raised the kids together.
No, and again, this is one of the things we talked about. And talking about it is great. It gives you a place, a starting point. It gives you a goal. Right. Then you're faced with the reality of having children.
Oh, boy.
And, I was in my mid-20s when we had our first child. And, I'm grateful I wasn't in my young 20s, like my early 20s. Yeah. Because I think... It would have been it would have looked a lot differently.
Well, even with our first kid, we did, and that's the guinea pig. That's what everyone says. We let him stay up till 10:30 or 11, and then eventually one of our friends is like, "Hey, I don't think that's going to work for you. You need to be a bit more consistent and change how that works." And we did. I remember my sister. She came up and she's like, "Man, why do you put your kids to bed so early? It's like 6:30 now." Like we had all three kids and she had no kids. Yeah. And she used to give me grief. Not like in a mean way, but I was just like, "Why do you do that?" It's like, I'd let my kids stay up till at least 8 o'clock. Then she had kids, and all of her kids at the age that they're at now, were the age of my kids. They all go to bed at like before 8, before 7 sometimes. The two youngest.
When they were young, they went to bed at 6.
And she's like, "Now I see why."
And here's a thing that just came to me as we were just having a conversation is that, not undermining you. We worked really hard not to undermine each other in front of our kids.
Yeah. No, it wasn't always successful, but.
Right. Of like, we had talked about this and then a situation arose and it was like, well, I, in the moment, changed my mind and I think you're being harsh. Yeah. Right. And in front of the kids is not the time to have that conversation.
No. And when they were younger, when we were trying to establish, like right now, if we disagree, we'll just disagree in front of the kids. Unless it's not a serious issue, but something they need to see that we're on the same page.
They see that we have conflict, and conflict is not a bad thing.
No, and we're resolving it.
Conflict is bad.
But where you're gonna struggle in parenting is when it comes to that side, and we actually see this when we coach with couples, is especially when they have children, is that the kids know the parents, one will give in and one won't. Yes. And so they actually manipulate both of them. That's right. To get what they want.
Huge tension.
And it's when you're in the middle of having kids all under the age of like 11 or 12 or 13, that cycle right there is incredibly challenging anyway, without you and your spouse or you and your partner not being in the same That's right. in the same mindset about how we're going to discipline our kids. If you say no snacks before bed, but the other one is like, yeah, you could have a snack before bed, but you're like, I already told him no. Yeah. And then the kid comes, oh, I want my snack. Well, dad said yes, and mom said no. Well, you weren't on the same page, and then you got to work it out right there. But if that happens over and over and over about every little thing, well, no pop, yes, no.
Oh,
it is.
You're a ticking time bomb for the parent that is wanting the established rules followed of like, hey, we talked about this and we agreed that this was how it was going to go.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't. It creates unnecessary, because you talked about this already. Like, it was communicated.
Yeah.
And if there's a change that needs to be made because it's a special occasion or whatever, like a birthday or whatever, then talk about that so that parents are on the same page.
And contrary to popular, what you see all over Instagram and TikTok and all these things now, it's okay that your kid is disappointed.
100%.
And it's okay that you disciplined your child and said, in fact, I'm going to support dad here. Dad said no snacks before bed. I'm going with dad. We didn't talk about it. Yeah, that's hard on you. That's okay that you're disappointed. That's you don't need to have a snack before. You just had dinner an hour ago.
Yeah.
We're going to go with that. It's okay that you do that with your kids, right? Like, it's 100%. Okay.
It like, I think learning to cope with disappointment
is a good thing for the kids.
It's a good thing, and it's a good thing for us as parents to teach our kids. And it's not to use it to manipulate and to just be mean and cruel.
Yep.
There are times where, it's a no, and it has to be a no. And it's okay that they express their disappointment in that. At the end of the day, you are the parent.
Yeah. Yeah. And absolutely. One of the next things that actually causes stress and it caused a lot of stress between Natalie and I, and a lot of tension was work-life balance. This is a huge one that I didn't really know that I was as much of a workaholic as I was until when I started at Trail back when we first started dating, because I had jobs before, but I wasn't working like 60 hours a week like I was there. I didn't realize I was a workaholic or enjoyed working that much. And part of it was because our marriage was terrible and I didn't want to go home. The other part of it is I wanted to provide for you. So again, on one hand, I'm like, I really don't want to go home because all we're going to do is fight. But on the other hand, I really need to go to work so I can support her, so I can go home and so we can fight. Yeah. Like, it was just a weird...
at an emotional crossroads.
Yeah. And so I worked a lot. Like, I was working 5, 6, 7 times, 7. I remember one time when we actually had a baby when I was still at Trail, I remember kissing Natalie goodbye on a Monday and saying, I'll see you Saturday, essentially, kind of thing, because she was in bed before I got home and I was gone before she woke up so often. We would talk on the phone a couple times. And this is one of those things that I didn't know was going to happen and we didn't handle very well. Mm-hmm. Also, not wanting to go home and you not wanting to be with me because we were fighting all the time made it easier for me to go. But we never communicated about it. We never talked about it. And then when we did, it was just flash in the pan bad. Well, why are you gone all the time? Well, because we don't have as much money and I'm struggling. Like, I want to work. And
well, it was always under the guise of financially providing. Right.
And part of it was, thinking back, part of it was because I wanted to make sure I was supporting you, truthfully. Right. But there's the other part where we were just arguing and fighting all the time and it was hard to be at home.
Yeah. But you get in this cognitive dissonance when, I'm craving quality time with you.
Yeah.
And I understand that you have to work.
Yeah.
But this is excessive.
Yeah. Well, and it wasn't just normal 40, 50 hours a week. It was like,
no. And like, for those, if you might be out there and you were like married to a workaholic or you were dating a workaholic, it's not to say that can't change.
No, because it sure can.
You changed. And, where we had a newborn baby and a colicky newborn baby. So if any one of you has had a colicky baby, it's exhausting in all, like, postpartum, everything. Everything is just exhausting. And so to feel like I am on my own.
Yeah.
With this, and you're gone and under the impression that you're financially providing, which you were,
but I'm also not choosing a relationship.
You're not prioritizing, right? And so there's this tug of war that happens of like, yes, I know you need to provide, but then there's still the balance of being at home. I
will say this, is that I think what we've learned over the last few years, and this is part of a book I read, I wish I could. I think it was Atomic Habits by James Clear.
I remember that book.
But said and he was talking all about discipline, and I don't know, he was doing a podcast with someone. He said the work-life balance is a myth. He said, realistically, if you look at your life, I spend more hours per week with the people I work with because 8 hours, that's what our culture does. We work for 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours a day. I spend more time with my, and so if I was to try and balance that out, especially when they're young and the kids go to bed at 7, I'd have to be off work every day at 12 just to spend the equal amount of time.
Right.
But where we get into trouble is when we choose work, and that's our number one priority over our family. And I can't stress this enough, only because I've been through this, is that there is no job. Maybe there's jobs, but there can't be a normal person job. Like, I'm a normal person. Like, I'm not a diplomat. I'm not a politician. I don't know what their hours are like, but I'm just saying that if you're working on, there's no job out there that's worth sacrificing your family for. I would say that even for politicians and diplomats and but I'm saying that there's no job out there that's worth working so much that you don't know your wife, you don't know your children. I remember I cried with my boss. I don't think I ever told you this. I was with Chris. He was my boss in Red Deer. And Rainen had been born, and I had gone back to work, and I hadn't seen him for like 2.5 weeks because essentially I would come home. You'd be already in bed. He'd already be in bed. It was like 9 or 10 at night, and I'd leave the next morning at like 6:30 or 7 to go to work. And I remember sitting in his office and said, if you don't give me time off, and I was crying in his office, said, if you don't give me time off, I'll quit right here. And they said, I need to have some time off so I can go see my son. I haven't seen my son in like, it was like at that point, like 17 days, like maybe little bits and pieces. And so there's no job that's worth sacrificing your family, but I can say that now. However, we dealt with that and hours got better. And then I ended up working as a job as a pastor. And I remember you telling me, I don't know, it was like year 3. You love your job. You love being a pastor of the church more than you love your family. And that just about gutted me. But it also forced me to make some drastic changes in how we approached our family.
Yeah.
And those things I was working, not because my pastor was saying, I need you to pull the hours into it.
Not at all. As a matter of fact, he was like,
he often connives around my back with my wife to get me to take time off.
Of making sure that you take your time off. But it's a type of, when you're in ministry, and anyone who might be in ministry knows that, you're pulled in 47 different directions, and people don't understand that you're like, well, you should be at my beck and call when I'm having an emergency. And there are times where, yes, it's like call back in business hours, right? Because we do have a family at the end of the day that we go to, and they are the priority.
I want to write a book for young leaders one day, like in the next few years, probably. I've thought about this a lot. One of my chapters is going to be all about other people don't know what your time is like.
That's right.
And they just assume that everything you do is for them. So the work-life balance is a really tough one. The next one is, there's a couple that I follow on Instagram that does little skits. She's an introvert or an extrovert, and he's an introvert. I'm an extrovert.
I'm an introvert.
And Natalie's an introvert. And we have learned now, after this many years together, what works and what doesn't. When she says she's done, it's not because she's trying to get out of anything. It's because she's finished and she's hit her limit. And she'll tell me usually before, she said, Brian, this will probably be the last one that I can do this week. Like, I'm tired, I'm done, I'm finished. And then sometimes she plans things and does it to herself.
That's right. And then I regret it. And
then there's sometimes I'm kind of a in between, an extrovert and introvert. I think in my older age, I'm more of an ambivert, where I'm either or, and that way. But this can be really hard on couples.
Social life.
That want to have a social life, one that does, and one that's just like chilling at home.
That's right.
Like Natalie's a homebody. Yeah. So me and my one son, Ezra, my middle son, and my daughter actually, Emrys, we're all like, let's go be where there's people. The bigger the crowd, the better. The more energy, the better. And meanwhile, my oldest son and my wife are exhausted being with the three of us because we're having the time of our life when there's like 100 people around.
Exactly. And there's a thing about communicating your capacity.
Well, right, and these things will cause a lot of tension, especially when you're young married, then you're young with young children, and if you don't realize that when you have a child, your life changes.
Yes, it does.
And when you're young and young married, man, you could do so much stuff together. You can just leave the house. You can go whatever restaurant you want. You can take off for a weekend. It's all good. When you have kids, that makes it a little bit more challenging.
100%.
And the one that needs to be around people maybe like starving to be with people. And then the one who, like, at the beginning of COVID, Natalie was like, this is the greatest thing ever. I get to stay at home. I love this. And I was like, I'm dying.
Oh, it was on a lot, on an emotional level, it was just wonderful. A forced
relaxation.
Well, it wasn't relaxing, but it was like forced downtime.
Yeah. And right. It was forced downtime. But then you realize, because you're an adult and you're healthy, you're like, we can't do this forever.
No,
this gets rid.
It got old quick.
And so that's the social life. You just got to be careful how you two communicate with each other about that. Like every one of these things, we'll get to that at the end. I want to talk about that at the end. But here's the last one the second last one we want to talk about is behavioral changes. This one's interesting. You want to kind of break?
Well, I just, when we were talking about this, just thought of, Jekyll and Hyde. was the visual that came to my mind in regards to behavioral changes. So we had an expectation. I had an expectation in our dating years and in our marriage based on evidence and facts that you and I had actually talked about, goals, plans that we had made for how this was going to roll out. And then the reality of marriage hit, and it was nothing like we had set out. It was just like that didn't matter anymore. And it was, you pulled a Jekyll and Hyde.
Mm-hmm. I remember we talked about this before.
And it was, you were like a chameleon. I felt really betrayed, and I felt like the rug had been ripped out from under me. And we did not align. Our reality didn't align with the expectation.
That's true.
Which can cause a lot of unease, can cause a lot of doubt, can cause okay, well now what did I do? Like I made the biggest mistake. That's really what it felt like.
Well, and like even to that effect too, like, I don't know, it's still like this now when young couples get married. Everyone and their dog is telling them, like, oh, lower your expectations in this area. And oftentimes, especially when it's couples that we know that have coached, I've never had sex before, it's always about, well, living together, that's going to be new.
That's right.
Bathroom experiences, showers, and sex, right? Like sex is always the big one.
Yeah. What happens though if there is like a health crisis?
Yeah.
And something happens.
Yeah.
You can plan on paper, but then, your expectation of we're going to grow old together, we're going to be healthy, and we're going to be doing all of these things. And then boom, out of the blue,
which we know a few couples
a
that
health
struggle.
crisis happens, right? And the expectation, then you're at that crossroads.
And I will, as a point of encouragement to any men that are listening to this, I was an extreme case. I literally, like when she says Jekyll and Hyde, she's not kidding. Before we were married, I was like the model boyfriend, model fiance.
With all the dumb cliches too.
Yeah, I sing her songs and write her poems.
You write me poetry.
And then I was not prepared for marriage, and it hit me like a ton of bricks, and I turned into Hyde real quick. Wait, no, Jekyll, the other guy, the bad one, Jekyll.
I don't know.
Whichever.
Aren't they both bad?
But I turned into something else that was not at all like I had expected, but also how she had expected. But I will tell you, in all of that, as a point of encouragement, that you can come out of that. You can change. Life can change. Right. You can get better. You can have a good relationship. You can have a good marriage. It just takes a lot of work and a lot of intentionality.
Well, and a lot of self-reflection.
Yep.
Like you can't get help if you don't think there's a problem.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you're in a situation where you or your partner is suffering from like severe behavioral changes,
right,
reach out, get counseling.
Yeah. Get counseling, get help.
I wish that we would have done that way earlier than we did. We are huge advocates for, what is that? Like extra help.
Yeah.
Oh, there's
counseling.
I just thank you.
Wow, the words are not your strong suit today, right?
Because they will help you navigate the new dynamics, right?
The thing is, too, is that what happens sometimes if a couple is struggling in their relationship, especially over the course of years, and they don't really communicate, and then one day you hear that you've seen it in movies, oh, they've changed. Yeah. Well, if you were walking with them, you would have seen that change and worked with that change with them, and you would have grown together. the way that you look at someone else across the table when you're eating dinner and saying, man, you've changed, I don't know you anymore, is because you weren't trying to communicate your way through it, or you just didn't know how.
That's right.
Right? And so all of a sudden you can genuinely have different values and the way you view things is different, all because you didn't communicate, you didn't talk about your expectations, and you literally just lived in the same house for years and years, still being friends and still doing things and still having maybe a good relationship, but you didn't know what was going on, so much so that you looked across one day, the kids are gone. Like we talk about this all. Natalie can't talk about our kids leaving without getting a little teary-eyed. But we're also thinking, like, we hear this all the time. The kids leave, and now the husband and wife are like, well, who are you?
Yeah.
And we really don't want that for each other. So that I'm looking forward is a strong word. I don't want them to be gone because I love my kids and I want to provide them every opportunity to succeed in the town that we're in.
Exactly.
But when they're gone, I want to be able to be like, Nat, hey, let's just pack up and go away for 2 days and be like, let's be spontaneous because we know each other well enough. I'm like, I know where I'm going to take her, and not look at her and be like, well, I'm going to hang out with the boys because I don't know who you are anymore. Right?
Exactly.
And so you will change, but if you're working together in the relationship, you will change together and grow with each other and build with each other and mature together. And that's exactly what you want.
And that was one of the things that we've talked about with our kids.
Yeah.
Of like, we want to set you up to be like, I don't know, model citizens, functioning citizens, contributing citizens, all the while cultivating our marriage. Right, because that is first and foremost.
Right, absolutely. And the last thing before we close this down is just sometimes affection or emotional support or.
Yeah. And you know what? It's okay to say to your spouse, "I got 50% of me today."
That's fair.
Right, and it's yes, the effort you're putting in is 100% and 100% if you want to make it work.
Yeah.
Over the long haul. But there's times where work was awful, or you got some bad news or whatnot, and you're just not at your optimal. And it's okay to not be at your optimal.
Yeah.
I think that's where we shoulder each other. Where if I'm generally speaking, it's worked out this way for us, where if I'm not 100% and I'm like 30%, you're 70%, right? And so we balance each other out.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a back and forth. And I think the expectation that someone else is giving 100%, like they're at 100% all the time, is unrealistic.
Exactly.
Especially when you have children and you both are working and you both have maybe higher stress jobs, or you're just like, and finances may not be great, or relationships with your in-laws may not be, like, whatever your situation may be, it's unrealistic for me to assume that every single day Natalie's going to be at 100%.
Right.
Right. And if I have that expectation on her and she didn't know about it, and now I'm disappointed because I didn't communicate that with her, and she couldn't even say, hey, well, that's not, how can I do that?
Right. And we're mismatched because you have an expectation of what your needs are and how I'm able to provide that.
Yeah.
And then I can't offer that, or I don't have the capacity to do that, or I'm upset about something and I'm unwilling to do that. It just creates, again, another tug of war of feelings and emotions.
We're just ripping each other back and forth.
Right? Like, you might want to, or I might want to crave, deep conversation. And you are like, I just can't right now.
I got nothing.
Right?
And there's been times where Natalie's talking to me about the day, and I just had come home. I'm sitting on the couch with the kids. They're all talking to me. And I said, whoa, everyone, I just need 15 minutes. Give me some time. And sometimes my way is not nearly that gentle. And I'm just like, everyone just stop talking. I'm going to go to the bedroom and just lay down because I'm tired.
Yeah.
Give me 20 minutes. And I barked instead of just said, hey, I just need a break. Like, I just need a few minutes just to recharge, and I'm going to come out. We're going to do this.
Right. And again, right, like, there's grace in the moment, but it boils down to like communicating, hey, it's not that I don't want to have meaningful conversation or whatever, but I just had to let someone go today or whatever, or someone died, or I mean, there could be a multitude, fill in the blanks of reasons why, which just drains on our emotional ability. And yes, we don't want to stay in that place, but there has to be communication of like a recharge time.
Yep. Right. And I like how we've titled each one of these things is the silent strain. There's a silent strain that comes. And I think even if after we've talked about our own through each one of these things, the one thing that we didn't do, and then the one thing that we encourage whenever we coach couples, whenever we're doing pre-marriage with couples, the one thing that we encourage to do is to communicate clearly. Communicate what the expectation is, if it can be met, meet the expectation if possible. And now that it's been voiced, you can actually work through those things together.
That's right. It's not just like voicing it once. This is like in all of these things we talked about tonight, these are like ongoing conversations, because as you grow together and as your seasons change and your kids grow up, or you have kids, or maybe you don't have kids and you get fur babies instead, right? There's always going to be opportunity for you to communicate. And it's not just, well, we communicated once and that should be good.
No.
We just
It's like
over-communicate.
It's like I said, I love you once when we got married. You know that I feel that way.
That's
well,
right.
no.
If it changes, I'll tell you. Yeah. Silliness.
That's it, right? And I always say this with all of our team. I said, leaders are repeaters.
That's
if
right.
I want to lead my house and Allie and I want to lead our children, we're going to repeat. Hey, I love you. This is a discipline in our house. This is a good. This is a bad. We're going to repeat it over and over. And even to each other, we're going to repeat certain things because we want us to, and not in a nagging way. That's a whole nother podcast. Let's not talk about that. But I think just as we close, I know this is a bit of a longer one.
It had to be, though, because it's a big topic.
And this is even just, I feel like we just scratching the surface of some of the stories that we heard from people and some of the things that we've been through in our own relationship. Even what I just said a few minutes ago, if you can communicate with your spouse, if you can take something that has become your normal, that should have been the exception, right? And you are actually experiencing like your actions
tension,
and there's tension in the relationship, and you believe one thing and she believes another, or he believes another, however and then you have to work towards it. And then your actions are saying something different. Hey, like you can communicate and you can work your way through this type of tension, this mental strain, the way that we said that they are, you can work through this and actually be successful. Both of you wave
the white flag.
Yeah.
Be like, what we call a truce. Hold, please.
Yeah.
Like, let's talk about this.
Plant that in the ground and just be like, hey, we're gonna do something a little bit different. Right?
That's right.
You with me?
Oh, yeah.
You still love me?
Yes.
Notice that she paused there, everyone. If you have really been enjoying, the last few episodes, but just this podcast in general, it really, really does mean a lot to us. When you can go onto our website, you can leave a review. You can also go onto the website and you can follow us on Instagram. You can follow us on Facebook. And if you have, and share it with everyone that you know. If you have a topic or a question or something that you'd like us to discuss, please just email us at amplifiedmarriage@gmail.com. We love hearing from you. And as you have heard us say many times before, we believe that marriage can be reset,
refreshed,
recharged,
and restored.
Thanks so much for listening.
Talk to you soon.